Hello everybody, so welcome back. This week we will learn chapter 2 about defining your own class. So basically in this chapter I will explain on how to define the class, how to define objects, and how to see the differences between classes and objects in the scope of a programming, Java programming. Okay, let's start. So basically by the end of this chapter, you will be able to define a class with multiple methods and data members, and you will also learn how to differentiate the local and instance variables in Java programming, and you will also learn how to define and use value returning methods, distinguish private and public methods, and also you will learn how to distinguish private and public data members and pass both primitive data and objects to a method. So basically, variables in OOP, there will be 4 kinds: data members, argument, parameter, and local variable. So then under these variables there will be also accessibility of the modifiers, which you will define to use what kind of modifier in your programming, either private or public. This will define how can we access those methods under these modifiers. And then it will also included with general syntax for data members and method declaration, and you have to know what the syntax, okay, the syntax and how for you to declare methods. And then after that you must know matching arguments and parameters. And once you already learn about all these variables, you will know how to set and get methods, which is also known as mutator and accessor. And then you will also learn about the constructor in Java programming, and then how to match argument and parameters, and how to see or differentiate what is overloaded methods in your programming. So, as a programmer, why we have to define class? It is very important for programmer to know how to define the class when you're working with OOP. So basically, if you're using a standard class such as string or JFrame, it will not meet all of our needs. So in order to meet all our needs, we have to define our own classes customized for our own application. So we know what we want for the application that we're going to develop, right? So we will customize all the classes that will be included in building the applications. So in order to learn how to define your own class, in order to learn how to create these classes, the first thing first is you must know how to define those classes. Once you master this skill, then you will be able to build a large program. So this kind of class that defined by the programmer are called as programmer defined class. So this is the first example. Let's see here. So in this slides we are trying to create a class named bicycle class. So first we decide the class name. Okay, class bicycle. And then after that, we decide on the type of data member. So we want it to be private. So we decided as a private string owner name. And then once we decide the data member, we're going to decide the constructor that will initialize the data member. And then we use public bicycle and owner name equal to unknown because it's the beginning, so we haven't insert any owner name yet. After that, we try to return the name of this bicycle's owner. We put public string get owner name, return owner name. That means we will pass the value of the owner name. And after that, we will assign the name of this bicycle's owner by using public void set owner string name, and then we decide the owner name equal to name. So this is a simple example on how to create one class. Okay, so in the previous slide we create the bicycle class, and then in this slide we are trying to use the bicycle class for bicycle registration. So earlier, create a bicycle class, and then this one is to register the bicycle. So as you can see here, we decide the name as bicycle registration, and then we set the public static void main, the main arguments, and then we have to create the instance of the class bicycles at the beginning. So first we decide on bike 1 and bike 2, and then string for the owner, so owner 1 and owner 2. And then after that, we have to create and assign values to bike 1. So we're trying, in this code, we're trying to assign bike 1 to its owner, a person name. So bike 1 equal to new bicycle. And then we set the owner to be Adam Smith. And second one, we doing the same thing to the bike 2, and then we set bike 2 to owner name Ben Jones. The output of the information will be the bike with owner's name on it. So we will print, this code will print an output as calling the name of the bike owner here, owner 1. Owner 1 is bike 1 get owner name, and then we will print the output as Adam Smith owns a bicycle. And then the second output will be owner 2, which is owner 2. See here, owner 2 will read the bike 2 dot get owner name, which is bike 2 is Ben Jones. So we will print the output for this code, owner 2, which is Ben Jones. Ben Jones also owns a bicycle. So that's gonna be the output for this code. And that is how simple example of how we use these two class in these two slides. Okay, let's continue. And now we will learn how to do object declarations. So once we already define class, we need to create an instance of the classes. So normally how we use is first we put the class name followed by the object name and then equal to keyword and the constructor. But you have to remember there are two ways to declare an object. That's one way. And then the second way to declare the object, class name followed with the object name, and then you take object name and then you assign it with new keyword and new instructor. Sorry, new keyword and new constructor. So in order to create multiple instances, we have to make sure this uh, class is correctly defined. So for example, the bicycle class. So once the bicycle class is defined, we can create multiple instances. For example here, okay, this is two different way how can you create multiple instances or object in Java programming. So first you decide the bicycle bike1 equal to new bicycle for the first object, and then second one bicycle bike2 equal to new bicycle. Or you can also define it as bicycle bike1 and bike2, and then you assign bike1 and bike2 as a new bicycle. So either way of defining is fine. This is two ways on how to create the instances. Both are correct. It depends on you. How are you comfortable in defining your instances? So once you have the data, so this data of bicycle registration will be connected to the class bicycle. So all the information about the bicycle, for example, about the owner, okay, bike 1 owned by Adam, and then bike 2 owned by James. So this information will be included in bicycle registration, will be stored in bicycle registration.java. In the meantime, on the other hand, we have bicycle.java, which is the main class for this programming. So this we call as source files. So each class definition will be stored in a separate file. So in order to run the program, first you compile Java bicycle.java first, and then see if there's any errors or anything, syntax error, fix it. And then after that you have to run bicycle registration.java, and then once you successfully compile these two Java code, then you can get the output by running Java bicycle registration. So this is how to illustrate the class diagram for the bicycle that we've been discussing. So here we list the name and the data type of argument that pass to the method. So we have two arguments here to get owner name and also to set owner name. So this is a basic template on how to do class definition. So there should be 5 steps that you have to remember. First, you have to import statements. Second, class comments. Okay, why is it so important to put the comments so that you can remember what is the class is about? Okay, for example, if you didn't look at the code for a few months and then you forgot about the function of the class, and when you come back, you know, and you want to use the class again, you know what's the exact function of the class. So put the class comments to make your life easier. And then the class name. The class name, normally we put class name that is related with the application that we're trying to develop. The data members, and then the methods, including the constructor. So how do we declare data members? So first you have to decide on the modifiers. If you want it to be public or private, it's up to you, because this will define the accessibility of your class. After that, you have to decide on the data types. If you want it to be string or you want it to be integers, and then decide on the name of your class. So here the example is owner name for the bicycle class. Remember, there's only one modifier in this example, which is the private. As I mentioned earlier, another modifier that you can use is public. So there are several kinds of variables. Okay, member variables in a class, these are called as fields or data members. This kind of member is a non-static field. And then fields declare with static modifier variables that are common to all objects, such as static fields or class variables. And then variables in a method or a block of code, these are called as local variables. And then the variables in method declarations, these are called as parameters. So let's see the code here in this class bicycle. The private string owner name is the data member of the field, and the private static integer speed equal to 20 is the class variables. And then all the information in public integer speed up is the local variables. What is local variables? The definition is right here. And then the public void set owner name is the parameter. The parameter here is name, string name. Name is the parameters. Okay. So for a constant variables, we can change the value of a variable. So if we want the value to remain the same, we will use constant. So for example here, the word final. So the reserved word, the word final already included, okay? Already included in this programming. So final is used to declare constant, which is number. And then here are the constant that we name as name constant. So for example, months, final integer months in a year equal to 12. So This value cannot be changed. And then second example, name constant here is Faraday constant. So we decide the value equal to 23,060. And these value in this column are called as the literal constant. And you have to remember that you cannot change the value of the constant. For example, the pi value, it's already defined as 3.142, or yeah, it's close enough, 3.142, 3.141559. You cannot change this pi value. And then you also cannot change the total months in a year. It is 12. You cannot change it to 13 or 15. If you try to change this constant value in your code, it will cause an error. So in this slide is the exercise for you. I want you to understand how to identify the class data members. Which one is class data members? Which one is parameters? And which one is local variables? You must understand this so that you will really know how to use it in your programming. Okay? So here you see three different colors. In the previous slides, I already mentioned which one is class data members, which one is the parameters, and which one is local variables. So based on the previous slides, I want you to define which one is which. It's like a self-exercise for you in order for you to know if you understand what I'm trying to teach you here or not. Okay? So, data member should be private. So, in the implementation details of a class, we have to set the data members as a private. Why? So, they should be invisible to the client. So, for example, if you wrote down important information such as your bank account number or student registration ID and so on a single sheet of paper, will this sheet be declared private and kept in your desk drawer or public and placed next to the dorm public telephone? So what I'm trying to say here, data members normally include informations that you doesn't want to share. So if you set the data members as private, all the information included under that specific class will be private and cannot be easily accessed by other class. So there are several guidelines for the visibility of the modifiers. So this is how you will learn which modifier you should choose, either public or private. So first, you have to declare the class method as public if they are used by other classes. So if you have methods in this specific class, and then you also have other classes that going to retrieve the class methods from this class, for example class A and class B, you want class B to be able to retrieve the class method in class A, so you must define class A as public. And second guideline is declare the class methods private if they are used only by the other method in the same class. For example, in class A, and then you have the class method in that class. So, but you don't want class B or class C to retrieve the class methods in class A, and then you should define the modifier for this specific class as private. And the third guideline is declare the class constants public if you want to make their values directly readable by other classes. If the class constants are used for internal purpose only, then declare them private. So, as mentioned in this guideline, you have to declare it as public even if you don't want the class method to be retrieved by other class. If you want it to be readable by other class, you must also declare it as public. This is how you declare the method. First, you have to define the modifier, and then define the return type, and then the method name, and then what is the parameter, and then the statements to be included in the specific method. So as the example here, the modifier is the public, and then the return type is void, and the method name here as set owner name, and then the parameter string name. Here you have to define what kind of parameter you want to put, either integer or string, and then after that, inside the method is the statements. So how to call methods of the same class? For example, you have class A and class B. Right here is the example. So it says here, it is possible to call methods of a class from another methods of the same class. So this is the example how we call the class without using the dot notation. So as you can see in A class here, this obj dot do word. So obj dot do word is a method from class B, right? So class A is calling do word method from class B. How to call a method from another class is by putting dot. Okay? But if you want to call a method without using dot, it's also doable. You can see here in this B class, when B class trying to call the method do word method, it just simply states the do word methods in the my method statement here. You can also change any class to a main class. So any class can be set to be a main class. What you have to do is to include the main method. So here we have the example, the class name as class bicycle. First, you do the definition of the class as shown before. And then the main method that shows a sample use of the bicycle class. So this is how you use the main method. So first you state the modifier, and then you set the main method, and then you include the statements. So now from a regular class, it became main class by simply include the word main before the parameters. Here it sets here the parameters, which is the string. Now about constructor. What is constructor? Constructor is a special method used to create new instance of the class. So first you have to set the modifier public and then the class name, and then in a bracket you include the parameters and then a statement, right? So this is how what we call a constructor. You define modifier. For example, here the modifier is public, and then you define the class name, which is here is the bicycle, and then you define the parameter in the bracket, and then inside this curly bracket you include the statement, and then the statement here is owner name equal to unassigned. So constructor is a special method that have these following features. First, it must have a same name as the class itself, not a different name. Second, it do not have a return type, not even void. And third, constructor play the role to initialize the default value for all objects data member. And then fourth, it invoke using new operator when object is created. And the last one, it is the best practice because it initialize all object data members value using constructor. So there are three types of constructors: default, no argument constructor, and parameterized. We will see in the next slide what is the differences between these three constructors. So for the first type of constructors, which is default. So this constructor automatically generated by the compiler if no constructors has been defined for the class. So if you create a class and then you did not define any constructor for your specific class, the compiler will automatically generate a default constructor for you. So normally default constructor provides the default value to the object like 0, null, etc. It depends on what kind of data type you are using for your class. And then for example here, okay, you define a class bicycle, but you did not include any constructor in this code. For example, you simply define the class name and then simply define the modifier, the class method, public string, private string owner name, public string get owner name, and then public void set owner name. Okay, so in this second box here, it shows how the compiler automatically generate for you a default constructor for your code. It's included here, the public bicycle. Under the private string owner name, the compiler automatically generate for you the default constructor, which is public bicycle. So how does the default constructor works? How does it invoked by the compiler? So for example here, in this bicycle registration class, so when you run this code, it will automatically set the constructor to default value, and then it will print the default value first before the first output. As you can see the output here, the first output will be null, and then second one it show the correct output, which is John Wick. And then the second type of the constructor is no argument constructors. No argument constructor is a constructor that has no parameters. So for this example, you can see the bold class here, the bold method here, public bicycle, and then in the bracket there are no parameters included. So this is the example of a constructor that named as no argument constructor that doesn't have any parameter. If you see the public void set owner name, the last one have string name. It has a parameter, but this one doesn't have a parameter. That's the differences. So how does it invoke no arguments constructor? How does the compiler invoke the no arguments constructor in our class? So for example here, the bicycle registration class. So when the compiler runs this code, it will automatically print out the first name, which is system out print line. It will print the output. So obj dot get owner name. That means this class are calling the get owner name method in another class. So this code will print the output as John Wick by calling the name from getOwnerName method. That's how it invokes the no argument constructor. For the third type of constructor, which is parameterized. So the parameterized constructor has parameters. Okay, so this kind of constructor used to initialize fields of the object to certain value. So this constructor, it set the first object to a certain value. It can be number, it can be digit, it can be boolean, it can be strings. So it depends on what you want to set. Okay, so for example here in the class bicycle, if you see at the second method, public bicycle string owner name. So in this method, the bicycle method, but the parameter that was set to this method is the owner name. So it called the first owner name that been saved in this code. So this code will automatically print the owner name as the first output when they run this code. So if we run this code, it will, for example here for the bicycle registration class, so the bicycle object equal to new bicycle John Wick. System out print line object dot get owner name. So automatically the code will give an output John Wick. This is how it invokes a parameterized constructor. Now we're going to learn about the reserved word this. So the reserved word this is called a self-referencing pointer because it refers to an object from the object's method. So for example, we have an object and then we want to refer the object's method. Okay, So how we do that? We use a pointer. How we use that pointer? We use the word this, as the example you see in this box. So you use the word this in the code by referring to the object that you already declared earlier. So this is the example how to use this in order to refer to data members. So for example, if you have a class name person and then you define the integer age, and then you define the method in this class, which is public void set age integer value age equal to value. And then this is the left box showing how you can normally declare a class without using this. But if you want to use this reserved word, you have to declare it as in the right box. Okay, the class person integer age public void set age integer age in the curly bracket. You use the reserved word this dot age equal to age. The age that you are referring to here is the integer age that you set as the parameter in the first line, the public void line. Okay, I hope you understand. So the age that referred in the statements, which is this dot age equal to age, is the first value that referred in the set parameter integer age in the column. So as we know earlier, we have three types of constructors, right? So we want to know how can we call constructor from another constructor of the same class using this. You can see here in this block of code how we can use this to call the instructor from another instructor. You just simply include this before the statement. And then how can you use this in the add method? So you can see here in this public fraction, method. So you use this to get the receiving this object's number and the denominator. Like here, n1 equal to this dot get numerator. d2 equal to this get denominator. That means the n1 value here will get the numerator value. d2 here will get the denominator value. And then this value will be stored and then it will be used here when you want to do the summation process, which is sum equal to new fraction n1. It will call the n1 value and then times d2 plus n2 times d1 and so n1 and d2 here you will get the value that you stored by calling this in the method that you used earlier.